This week on Intrigued Full Effect.
Your children are your children. And, as a Black father, yes. And I do get that there's a lot of stereotypes out there when it comes to Black males not loving our children. I can't see it, I guess, because I do love mine.
I'm Chandrea Thomas, and welcome to episode 45. In this podcast, I talk about curious cases, disappearances, and other stuff. And I know it's been a while since I put out an episode, but I'm back. Today, I'm talking about the disappearance of 24-year-old Daniel Robinson from Phoenix, Arizona. The geologist went missing from a well work site in the middle of the desert in Buckeye, Arizona on June 23rd of 2021. I had a candid conversation with his father, David, about the search for his son, the struggle he says he's having with the Buckeye Police Department investigation, and some new details in the case that I didn't know about. And I reached out to Buckeye Police about the case. This is what happened. My first question for you is, how are you doing right now?
I'm doing okay. Just still maintaining, still stepping this gap for my family, but I'm doing okay.
Mm-hmm. As far as, let's get into your son's case. I know you've gotten some media coverage. A lot of families struggle to get that, but you've been able to get it. But I know there was kind of the Gabby Petito situation kind of helped boost it a little bit. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But tell me about how you found out about your son's disappearance. This is June 23rd of last year. So how'd you find out he was missing?
Well, I did get a call from my daughter. She lives here in Phoenix, and she got alerted by a coworker that came to her house and tell her, hey, look, he was looking for Daniel. That alerted her. She felt that it was strange that they came to her house looking for him, and he's supposed to be at work, and she didn't hear from him. So she did alert me that the company was actually looking for Daniel from that point. Yes.
And then, as far as what you knew about your son's disappearance, what did you discover about that, and how was that at this point?
Well, one of the things is just because, the fact that, we know my son, I know my son, initially, that whole 6 hours when I found out it was actually 6 hours over 6 hours that he was actually last seen, that was problematic for me. So, of course, I know my son. So to me, I know that something was wrong. The whole pattern of Daniel just been broken. So that was problematic for me, even though to this day, because with him just disappearing off the job, just based on one guy's story at the well, the worker. That is out of Daniel's character. And to this day, I still can't really understand the beginning of this whole narrative.
Actually, let's get into that really quickly, because you say the 6 hour window. So explain to me, what do you mean by that exactly, the 6 hour time period?
Well, Daniel, our family, we're a very tight-knit family. My son, he often, we have our conversations, always a 2-hour conversation, between me and him. He tells me everything, that he tells me as a father. He asks for advice, but, some things that he don't tell me, he'll tell his siblings. So just like telling his siblings is like telling me, because they would end up eventually telling me some things and vice versa. So we all eventually make smaller sense. We all know about each other, what's really happening. So with Daniel's pattern, Daniel, he's a very adventurous guy. He liked to travel, he liked to go places, to see his friends, his sibling that lives in California, for instance. He comes to South Carolina sometime to visit us. But Daniel always would tell us where he's going. It's been times where he'll leave, but within that travel, he'll say, hey, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. So that 6 hour window was a little too long, because sometimes he don't do it immediately, but he would do it at least within that 6 hour window, tell us where he's going.
Oh, okay. I can see that too, because I was just thinking, like, especially in the areas that he would work in, I mean, they're pretty remote, for the most part. So let's get into like the timeline, because I think that's something that's very interesting here. From when Daniel was seen, I guess he was seen, what are the roads?
Sun Valley Parkway and Cactus Road.
Yes. So let's get into where he was last on those roads, and then the last person who saw him, and into this guy who said he was law enforcement who saw him, but he seemed to be okay. There's so many things that we need to get into. So can you kind of run me through that?
Yeah, sure. Dan, he's a field geologist. So he was going out to the well site that morning. He went to two. He went to one roughly around 7 o'clock that morning. That was off of Veraldo Way area. He had to do some pictures over there. And then once he left that well site, he called a guy from that was already at the well site from a company called Weber, different company. But he called a guy to meet him out there so he can do his job. They both met out on Southern Valley Parkway, Cactus Road area. That's where the entrance gate is to that well site. They met out there, had a little brief discussion. My son followed him into that desert out there, is a mile west and then 2 miles north to get to that well site. They had a brief conversation about the weather. My son was supposedly said he was a little tired and things like that. Wanted to go ahead and get some rest. After a little brief conversation, like I said, within 10 minutes, the story is my son waved off and got in his vehicle and drove off where he was never seen. However, hindsight now, we also had ended up being the second guy that did say that he also seen Daniel that morning. He first alerted himself as being a federal law enforcement agent. That since has been debunked. He's not a federal law enforcement agent, but he was cleared by the Buckeye Police Department, what I was told. And his story was corroborated, but he did say he saw Daniel out there twice out there where he was out there target practicing with his children. Roughly, at first he said 1 a.m, but he said roughly around 10 o'clock that morning. Like I said, Daniel, the first time he saw him through his scopes of his rifle. Second time he saw him near a what they call this wagon of wash. It was like dumped off into the river on the banks, working on his car, doing something, cleaning his car out of other. He talked to Daniel. He said Daniel was very mild mannered. Gave him direct. They had a discussion about where it was proper for him to target practice at. Daniel told him, hey, you shouldn't do it in that area. That's where they're working. He did point him out to BLM Lands, Bureau of Land Management. So that's pretty much the sum of that kind of people who actually saw my son that morning.
What he said to you and the description of Daniel, you feel pretty confident that there was a second person who saw Daniel after he left the well that particular day.
Yes, well, at least that's what I was told. I did talk to the gentleman at one point. I have since to make sure, like I said, verify that with the Buckeye Police Department, which in turn told me, yeah, they verified his story. He said he did see Daniel that morning. But what it does for me as a parent is it debunks to me that theory that Daniel was somehow, have some kind of issues with his emotions and things like that. The coworker saying he was acting odd and strange and things like that. That was kind of different from what that last person that seen Daniel thought of Daniel. He didn't see the same characteristics that the coworkers would say.
Okay, so let's get into when the Jeep was found. I know he was very proud of this Jeep. It was a new Jeep for him, right? So as far as where his Jeep was found in proximity to where the well was, how far was that and how long did it take for them to actually find the Jeep?
Well, of course, yeah. The well site and the proximity where the vehicles recovered, that's about 3 miles from the wells. It's southwest of where the well site was where Daniel was last seen. Only about 3 miles. They did do, according to Buckeye, they did 2 extensive searches of that area and did not see the vehicle. And of course, we ought to know the rancher who actually found the vehicle on the July the 19th said that he was there 2 to 3 days prior to July the 19th, and the vehicle wasn't there. Of course, he was out there chasing down his cattle. And he was in that area because his cattle always travel down that same ravine that the vehicle was found in. They didn't come through there the first time, so he went back there again. That's when he located the vehicle.
And see, so that's what I find kind of strange, because you would think that it would have been seen way before this day. So more weeks have gone by, the Jeep wasn't there, and then all of a sudden the Jeep appears in this space.
That's right.
What goes through your mind with that?
It's really troubling for me. As everybody know, I started my own searches right after my son went missing. It's only been like a little over almost 2 weeks later that my son went missing that I started my searches. My searches covered the well area, and that's where we stepped in. We stepped in that area where the well site was and trying to locate Dane's vehicle to rescue him. To say that it was just that close and these 2 searches from professionals and they did not find this vehicle. It is troublesome to me, meaning, and the more reasons why is because once that vehicle did show up, I expanded my searches to cover that area to look for Daniel also. And that's when we discovered the first human skull that was near that area. And we're trying to, in my mind, I wonder why that department with all the cadaver dogs to search dogs that they say that they have not located these items that we found. They come up empty, and we come up with things as civilians. So yeah, it's always bothersome to me to this day to be able to say that why those things wasn't caught earlier.
Wow. So yeah, I'm definitely going to get into your searches. As far as his Jeep goes, what did you guys find inside of the Jeep? I understand there was like a black box or something inside of there and some other possessions in there along with the Jeep.
Well, everything Daniel was wearing his clothes, we already know that was outside the vehicle. Everything from his underwear, socks, everything was on the ground. But what was found in the vehicle was his cell phone, his work computer, and one of his backpack. The backpack, like I said, contained his work computer, of course, his keys to the vehicle itself, things like that. But other than that, everything was outside the vehicle. His personal effects, with his wallet, for instance, was inside the pants pocket of his clothing that's on the ground in the pile.
So what does that say to you? I mean, when you guys were going out there with your own investigators and things like that, I mean, compared to what Buckeye Police, and we'll get into that relationship in a little bit, but right. Compared to what they're saying and what you guys found out there, what comes to your mind as far as the theories about what may have went down out there?
A lot of people say I'm biased because I'm a father. I'm supposed to be biased, and the reason why, because I know my son. But at the same time, I do have a brain. I do, I can just look at it. Anybody can look at that scene, and then you look at it and say, hey, this young man who's a scientist disappeared 30 days later. Vehicle wasn't there 30 days later. Almost 30 days later, shows up. And not to show up in any kind of way. It showed up wrecked, showed up with red transfer paint on the side. There's nothing red in the desert. Everything on his body was on the ground. The sunroof was kicked out. There's no glass in the sunroof, but he was able to kick out a panel, and he's gone. Anybody can look at that scene and this infer that, hey, look, something suspicious is going on. And from my point of view, yeah, I was thinking, some type of criminal activity happened, just by looking at the scene.
When I reached out to the Buckeye Police Department about the case, I was referred to their media page, which has a breakdown of exactly what they did with the case. David says his last communication with the department was within 1 week of this podcast. This is in the middle of the desert. I mean, literally. Yes. Anything could happen out there. There's people traveling through the desert, all types of things. So he could have encountered something. Anything could have happened out there.
And that's true. There's wild animals out there. People don't know there's mountain lion out there that lives a very aggressive. Game fish have him tagged, but he's very aggressive out there. You have rattlesnakes. You have it all. You also have the cartels out there. You have human trafficking out there, and just the fact that like I said, my searches alone have found human remains, and so that's obviously a crime scene. It's a place where people obviously either dumping people there or crimes are happening there. So yes, there's all kinds of things happening out there in that desert.
Do you feel deep down that Daniel is out there somewhere alive? Do you feel like you just don't know? Do you feel like there was really some foul play involved in all of this?
I feel all kinds of ways. Some days I feel optimistic, and other ways because of things I do know. Evidential wise, it tugs at your faith. It tells at your mind. It tells at your heart. My love and my heart want to say, I know my son is alive, and I really have faith. I have faith in God. First of all, I'm a man of faith, and despite of everything I see and things I know about this case that would suggest otherwise, I still try to find that glimmer of hope that my son is out there somewhere alive, and that all of this is a big waste of time. He's there, and that's what I hope for every day.
What is that like for you? I mean, when you go out there and have your searches and you come across these human skulls and remains and things like that, I'm wondering, of course, you're wondering, is it your son first? But secondly, just right. As a person encountering that, I imagine those who are out there searching with you, it has to be kind of wild to come across that,
It does. I had my daughters out there at one instance, for instance. They used to come out to the search at the beginnings. And one of them did. And I stopped it immediately when I thought about it. First of all, I don't want them to find their brother in that state. Once we started finding those human remains, I didn't want them to run into their brothers. They have that last memory. But for the volunteers, it's very hard. It's definitely hard for me too, because every time we find remains out there, it's always in the back of my mind, hey, what if this is my son? And so it's very hurtful, especially when we find the fresher remains lastly this year. Is very scary each time. But only good part that comes out of that is the fact that I know later on, once I realize it's not my son, is that we somehow brought some closure to another family who don't know their loved ones probably for years, and get some type of sense of closure to know they found something of their loved one.
Mm-hmm. Now let's get to your searches really quickly. How many searches have you had? I mean, I imagine there's hundreds that you guys have done at this point. How many square miles have you searched, and where have you extended it out to?
Well, as to date, we did at least about 30,000 acres of land out there that we covered, and that was by mostly line searches, and then we utilize UTV ATVs. As in the square mileage, I can estimate about 11 square mileage or so out there, but yeah, we covered a lot of ground. We still have a lot of ground to cover. That's why I'm still trying to get the searches going a lot better now. I had to cut it down to once every 2 weeks now, but definitely we covered a lot of ground since we've been out there with the volunteers.
Mm-hmm. And I guess my other question is, as far as you guys extending, are you going into the city? You're going to other areas and passing out flyers? Where are you doing that? Is it just pretty much the Phoenix metro area where you're doing that, or?
Well, yeah, I do that. And, I started first it was the flyer, I call it flyers, the city searches. We was going out to passing up flyers to the hospitals, to the mental health wards, especially focusing on the homeless populations, because I don't know what happened to my son. The focus was to the homeless population and the hospitals, because what if Daniel got out of that desert? He don't know who he is, or he somehow became part of the homeless population, things like that. So it was geared towards that. Then later transferring over to flyer distribution, I changed that over to that point because I have people come grab these flyers. They take them to their cities, where they're here in Arizona, trying to cover every city here in Arizona and also abroad all over this country. So people do grab those flyers. So that's what I have now, is the flyer distribution to bring awareness and things like that.
When is the last time you actually talked to Daniel, and what was their conversation, if you can share that?
Yeah, it was 2 days, two or so days. I believe it was 2 days before Daniel went missing. And our conversation was just the same. Daniel, only thing, he had a little more details on some questions asked. As you know, he did mention the young lady that he met doing Instacart. So we did have a little small conversation about that. But, most of this conversation was about the future events. People don't know, but we had plans that I was supposed to be here in Arizona and Phoenix to visit him and his sister in July last year. And so we had plans there. Instead of seeing his vehicle for the first time, for him showing me in July, I seen it the way it was wrecked with him missing. So, but yeah, our last conversation was basically that, talking about, future events, his entrepreneurship, his travel plans and things like that. He and his sister had plans to go hiking that weekend, things like that. Just the same old 2-hour conversation that me and Daniel have.
So as far as when you stop and look at his state of mind, I mean, he was pretty much normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary that he was talking about that would alarm you in any way as far as his state of mind 2 days before he disappeared. We just want to establish that, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Daniel, he's a very inquisitive guy. He looks up to me as a father. He always going to ask me questions. He always asks me my guidance to everything, from, hey, should he, look into this cryptocurrency, for instance, or whatever you need to do this, or how I go about fixing this, building this computer that he just built. He was building it a few days. He finished building it a few days before he went missing, a computer, how to go about doing. So he's always been inquisitive about everything, always asking questions. So for instance, he asking questions about love and things like that. He just have questions. So that's just Daniel.
Yeah, he's a young guy just wanting to ask his dad about life, it sounds like.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to have that good conversation with him, as far as that last conversation. Let's move into the Buckeye Police Department. That's been, it sounds like, from what I'm gathering, it's been a very tense or not so good relationship. So I want you to kind of explain to me what's happened with the department and where do things kind of go astray between the two of you?
Well, when I first got here, it was only because I left the way I did. It's because, I first got alerted that they weren't going to go search for my son because they felt like he was a grown man and he can disappear. Just the fact that they thought that Daniel wanted to disappear and they weren't going to look for him, that just got me to leave and get here to Phoenix. But, of course, I don't know anybody here in Phoenix other than my daughter who's living here. And I need to find my son. So I had started my own investigation, but I had to work with the Buckeye Police Department. I try to work with them everywhere I can, give them information about themselves, about my son's call records to his bank statements, and also trying to get them to get things like the cell phone pings to Uconnect and things. So everything worked out pretty well until the vehicle showed up. When the vehicle showed up and they gave me those theories that they had, and I didn't agree with those theories, I hired my own investigator who, in fact, found a lot of more evidence, physical evidence, that would suggest foul play. Once we turned those things over, we were reluctant to do so at the beginning because of some other things with Buckeye, but we ultimately did. And once we did that, that's when they shut down. To this day, don't really call me or communicate with me as a father. And that's when our relationship started falling apart.
Wow. As far as the theories that you did get from Buckeye Police, what was that?
Well, first of all, the department called me. The vehicle was found on the 19th of July. They didn't call me to the 20th. I've been here on the ground since June the 26th, searching for my son. They know this. They called me over 24 hours later to let me know the vehicle was found by a rancher. Of course, I asked them why they didn't call me. They said, "Hey, we didn't want to disturb your sleep," which I thought was ridiculous. But they did call me into the department. And what their theories were, they only had three items. The detective, he had two maps and one picture. He showed me where my son's vehicle was in relations to the map in Sun Valley Parkway, and then he started going through the theories of what he thought happened to my son on the scene. When he showed me the vehicle on the picture, he showed me the clothing that was on the ground. He said, "Hey, this is your son's clothing. Everything on his body is on this ground in a pile." He asked me what type of underwear my son wear. He wear boxes of briefs. I wouldn't know that. He's a grown man. He said, "Well, it was on the ground too." That was very devastating to hear. But he said the good part is, Mr. Robinson, that we feel that your son didn't sustain any injuries, even though he told me at the time the car flipped in the roll and everything like that. He said he didn't suffer any injuries because there was no blood in the vehicle, and he had his the way the seatbelt was locked. He had a seatbelt on. And so he didn't sustain an injury. But they say at the same time, they feel like he had a severe head injury, a brain injury. And then he kicked his way out the sunroof to escape. And head injury, he went through a detail to tell me that head injuries causes you to shred your clothes off because you think you're hot. And he shred his clothes off. He must have walked off from the scene to go up under a tree to cool off. And he probably succumbed to his injuries or got taken by some wildlife animal. They later told me that maybe he wanted to be away from his family and join a monastery, become a monk. After hearing that kind of rhetoric and things like that, of course, I'm not going to look at that and say, "Hey, I agree with you." I decided to get my own investigator because after they told me that story, they turned the vehicle over to me and gave me everything that belongs to my son and expected me to go home. And I couldn't go with that.
You got the vehicle. What did you guys find? Like, what was left behind, I guess, inside of it?
Well, to this date, I only seen that vehicle twice. I seen it one time by Detective Biffin, who showed it to me at the police compound. And then the second time is when my former private investigator showed it to me at the locations where it's stored now. But I have never looked inside the vehicle. I do have pictures of items that was there. I did see it briefly when Detective Biffin opened the back door of the vehicle. I seen things like baggies with look like dirt or rocks or things in it. I later found out that was the samples from the well from his job. That's what they do. They put in these little Ziploc type bags to turn in. Also, just a NYPD bag or something like that. Other than that, I have everything else is based on pictures I've seen, the hard hats, the where his wallet was at, his school ID, a big box of invoices and things like that. Just regular items in this vehicle.
Okay, and then I think I heard you say that he had his computer and stuff in there. Was there water and things just for being out in the desert and stuff like that?
Well, in Arizona it doesn't rain that much, especially that time of the year. But it did rain. Supposedly rained that day Daniel went missing. One thing the Buckeye Police Department pointed out to me in that vehicle was a hard hat, and it was filled with water. They say, hey, we found a hard hat filled with water, but nothing else was wet. Just the hard hat filled with water. Everything else seemed to be okay.
Now he wore like a vest. I imagine they wear like a safety vest or something out there too. I think
Yes,
I
he
saw
did.
that in the picture as well.
That's right. It's another foot away from the pile of clothing. There's a pile of clothing. His pants turned inside out in that pile, but that the safety vest he was wearing was another foot away north of that pile of clothing, and then you have one of his boots is southeast, probably another 2 feet away from that pile of clothing, and then the other boot was tucked under the front end of the vehicle, along with the panel from the sunroof.
So what do you know about the searches that Buckeye did conduct? Like, they actually went out there and did some search at some point. What do you know about what they did out there?
Well, what bothered me, like I said, when they told me they weren't going to go search for my son, that was a problem. I was on the road. Once I made it here to Phoenix, I just got into the outskirts of Phoenix when I got a phone call from my auntie in Philly. She said, hey, David, Phoenix Buckeye Police Department said they're going to get this Firebird helicopter in the air. And I was really relieved to hear that. They did say they was going out that was almost 3 days later, almost 3 days after my son went missing. Think about that. Almost 3 days later, they decided to put this Firebird in the air. I was a little relieved of that. And then they waited another week and a half to do a second search with some place, entity called the Civil Air Patrol. They did a search with the Civil Air Patrol that went out there, like I said, another week and a half after that first initial search. And both of those searches, they came up empty-handed.
So at this point, I mean, as far as your relationship with them, there's no update on any type of investigation or tips or anything coming from Buckeye that you're aware of at this point?
No. What I was last told by the Buckeye Police Department when they gave me everything of my son, they told me they didn't have a case. They have no more leads to follow. Excuse me. They didn't have no more leads to follow. Once I got my private investigator, they told him they're not investigating. That's what they the one that turned that black box data over to my investigator, who in turn read the data that they gave to him. That determined 11 additional miles on the vehicle, things like that we know now. That came from that black box data. But yeah, they turned everything over to me saying, hey, they didn't have an investigation. They put it on their Facebook page. There's more leads to follow, no more leads to follow, and things like that. So the badge they gave me, everything they gave me in evidence badge was marked for safekeeping. I found out later that meant that they felt that Daniel was going, from that scene, he's going to show up one day and come back and grab his things. So they just turned it over to the family.
Okay, and just to clarify, when you say the black box, this is the black boxes that was inside of his Jeep?
Well, it's really, we call it a black box, but I think it's called an ECM. It's the computer, the vehicle's computer. What it does is stores data, especially when the vehicle crash. It's quick microsecond type deal. It have not timestamp, but events stamps in the vehicle. So that's how they know the additional miles, or the vehicle was cranked over 4 to 6 times after the first crash, and things like when the airbags are deployed and things like that. All that information comes from that black data, that box. We call it a black box, right?
Okay, so was there one crash or was there 2 crashes?
According to my private investigator, he's as a reconstructionist, it was multiple crashes. It was the first crash that caused the airbags to deploy. The vehicle was driven 11 additional miles, where it ended up in that ravine, which could have been more crashes between that point, but that ravine is the second crash.
What day, at what point was your last conversation with Buckeye? Was that in 2021? Like, when was that last communication with them?
Well, I just recently had a text message from a Detective Biffin from the Buckeye Police Department, but he added one of my guys from the searches, which I thought was very improper. So it is a text message asking me for my son's personal things. It wasn't through a warrant. It wasn't through a letter to my attorney. It was a text message. Hey, we can do the forensics work for you if you want us to turn over, his computer. That's not how you do protocol, and not when you send me a text message with one of the guys from my searches name, both for sending this information to both of us. So at this point, that's the last time I heard from them, which is a few days ago now.
Oh, wow. No, I know. I remember, I recall that you were saying that you were in the process of trying to process the evidence and fingerprints and things yourself. Where are you with that right now?
Well, the good thing is, like I said, I had to cut down my searches because of that. because of funding. Trying to utilize the funding the proper way. Everybody knows that I'm using partial of my own money and also the GoFundMe to fund everything that I'm doing here, mainly here in Arizona, for instance. And one of the things is to cut down some of the dispenses that I have, like for my searches tomorrow, the dispenses that we're using out there, just so I can have enough funding to start working on the forensic work. I have to get the cell phone is already being processed. I have to get the other cell phone that we found near the scene processed. I had to get everything on the ground, his clothing, his boots, his safety vest, also the red transfer paint that's on the vehicle airbags and everything. All that stuff need to be processed to forensically, because it wasn't done by the Buckeye Police Department on the scene. They did do fingerprinting under my request a few days after they gave me that vehicle. I did requested that. They did fingerprinting. I haven't gotten anything back from them. They don't, like I said, don't tell me anything. So I had to also get that done.
As far as you searching wells for your son and throughout this whole process, what have you discovered at this point?
Well, a couple of things. Like I said before, Buckeye Police Department had admitted they didn't do a search of the well initially, as I thought. It's also going correlation with what the worker said who was there last seen my son at that well. But I did have them to come into of one of my searches to the Buckeye Police Department, that is, to come in to search the wells and also bring in cadaver dogs. They did come, but they came kind of empty-handed. They had put some cameras down in that well, both wells. There's one that's where my son was last seen, and one was north of that. They went to the one that's north of that and put a camera down, and they went to the surface of the water and then pulled back up and say, "Hey, your son's not there." Of course, in my mind, I just let it slide, but my mind was there. No, that's unacceptable to me. Also, they had a cadaver dog there. Like I said, like a family pet to me. It was really fluffy, little cute white dog, but they said it was a cadaver dog. That didn't alert on that thing. So after that little search they did, of course, I hired my own, got my own company to go search those wells. We was able to search the well where Daniel was last seen. I cleared that well. It was nothing there. It was straight shot down. That well went down at least 800 some feet from the surface down through the water to the bottom. But the other well, it was a little different. We went there, we found a lot of obstruction in that well. When we got down to the water level, it's like 500 feet before you get to that water level, and that's where the obstruction began. The way to explain that is to work my way backwards from the bottom up. From the bottom of that well, there was a fence pole down in the dirt part of the well. On that fence pole, there was a mound of dirt sitting on top of that fence pole, indicated somebody was dumping a large amount of dirt down in that well. Above that, another level up there was a wood structure, like they tried to throw something wood, but it kind of got enlarged on the sides of the well. And on top of that was another pipe, a really big pipe that they tried to get to go down there. I guess knock that wood down, but it didn't take it. It's kind of stuck there. So we was able to get around that obstruction with the cameras to get all the way down that well. Like I said, from the surface of the well down to the bottom is almost 1,000 feet. It's like 890 something feet down from that surface of the water down to the bottom of to the settlement down the bottom. Once we got to the settlement at the bottom and looked around on that settlement, that appeared to be some little round little disc area. We kind of looked at it, couldn't really tell it was. We tried to use the camera to kind of knock some of the dirt around on the bottom. And lo and behold, it looks like to us the top of a human skull, but we're not sure what it is exactly. So my plans now is to take that, because we record those film as the camera go down, to take that footage to a pathologist or someone who's familiar with identifying human skulls, and see if that is indeed a human down in that well.
That is quite the discovery. If there is someone down there, who is this person, you know?
Right. And the scary part was, like I said, the guy, that's what he does. He inspects wells. And the way we was able to get down in those wells are private wells. Mm-hmm. And the only way we was able to get in that well, I had to make a deal with the owners. They first didn't want me there. They then secondly say, hey, they want to make sure everybody have insurance, which is fine. We did that. And thirdly, as an incentive for them, is the company that I used was inspecting the well. So they got a free inspection of their well. They liked that. So they allowed me to go in their wells to search those wells because it came with a free inspection. So being ever there, this guy, he was able to Like I said, that's what he does for a living, this company. And they said those wells do not supposed to have obstructions in it like that. Fence poles and those type things that was there. Yes, they shouldn't have been there. And like I said, with the amount of dirt sitting on top of that pole, that when it comes to that little junction there, indicates all the dirt that is thrown down in there. To cover, to me, in my opinion, to cover something up.
Wow. So let me just make sure I get a proximity of these locations. So how far is this well from the original well Daniel was working at versus where his Jeep was found? Like, how far is it from those two things?
It's probably less than a quarter of a mile. Just like less than 1/4 of a mile away. It's from where Daniel's vehicle, where his he last seen the well site he was last seen at. It's north, like a quarter of a mile, if that, north of that well. James' Jeep was found 3 miles southwest from that well site where Daniel was last seen.
Okay. Wow. So there's definitely something to think about with that. So,
Yes,
so again, you're going to be searching that, I guess, getting a deeper look into that whole thing coming up in the
that's right.
coming months here.
That's
Well,
right.
and you know, I was just thinking too, you're getting really close to that 1 year mark of all of this.
Yes, very much so. We just had a candlelit visual, I'll do things like that. I have a fasting and prayer coming up this coming Wednesday. And coming up to that year mark, I'm praying and asking God, please allow me to find my son before then. If not, I'm sure we'll be doing something in honor of that also. Like I said, I do have the foundation that I'm working on in the honor of my son's name. And so hopefully we'll be getting that up also pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. And what would the foundation do, or what will it be? Is it to help missing persons' families, or is it?
And that's it. Everything I've been through, my family been through, what I've been through, just trying to start searches, to trying to get equipment that I needed, to try to get investigative stuff done, all that stuff. Hopefully, the foundation. That's what I'm working on to provide for families, to give them guidance to what to do, especially families of color, Black families. I want to make sure we can try to close that gap that happened with Elton, with Black families and people of color when it comes to getting their stories out there, for instance, without when it comes to having the money to search, or the money to provide a place to stay while they're searching for their loved one, things like that. So we want to try to provide a lot of things like that.
Mhm. Let's move into some other parts of what was going on with Daniel leading up to his disappearance. Um, so he had some people who he was, I know he's big on online. He does a lot of online stuff and things like that. You said he built his own computer and that type of thing. So he actually had some people who were coming to visit him, like during that time frame when he disappeared. Or tell me about that.
Well, he did have a friend of his that came from New York. I think what Daniel told me, that he was actually thinking about moving to Phoenix. So he wanted to stay with Daniel for a few days to, kind of scope the area and find out where he wants to, eventually move to. So he did come out and do that. I think he left at least a few days. I would say about 4 days or so before Daniel went missing.
Oh, so you guys were able to confirm that this person was out, long gone, wouldn't have any part in anything. Okay.
Well, that's what I was told by my investigator. So yes.
Okay, got you there. Let's get into this text message situation, this young woman that Daniel met. I know there's information all over the internet about him stalking her and him having some sort of obsession with her, and these text messages that were, put out publicly. Tell me, what is your perspective on that, and what do you know about that at this point?
Well, some parts of me would say that's a distraction, from the fact that the Buckeye Police Department hasn't taken my son's case seriously at the beginning. Because, one of the biggest thing is for me as a father is to watch this department put a young lady's text message in their system. Not only did they not put this messages on their report themselves, they allowed this lady to upload her own text messages into that report. Through a system that they have, which could have easily been adopted, could have been changed or anything. But the whole bottom line is a hearsay testimony in a sense. It's one-sided. It comes from one lady's, like I said, her own uploading. It wasn't like from a warrant that the officer went in her phone themselves and uploaded that to the police report, but she was doing it herself. Also, they had my son's cell phone from the scene. Detective Biffin had it from the scene. He had it for a few days. When I received the phone from them, That phone was wiped off, his memory card was taken out of there. Everything about this young lady was wiped out of the phone. When it comes to text messages, the Google history was wiped out of the phone. Things like that. So to me, that signifies some type of hiding something, foul play type deal. The trash can in his phone was empty. So, that type deal. It's one-sided. When I look at my son's phone records, her text messages don't match. We can't, of course, see the messages, but it don't match the timestamps.
Wow. So I was going to, so as far as what your son's side of it was, can you speak anything to what you know of that, or is that something that you holding on to confidentially?
Well, some things I have to hold on confidential. That's some things I did get once I speak with the representatives at Google, who was able to help me get some of that data back to Daniel's phone, so I can have some understanding to where Daniel was located days before he went missing. But some of those things I definitely had to keep. But as in his phone, I can say those things do not match. A lot of things do not match what is on that report, as in timestamps.
Wow, so that can totally change the whole entire narrative of what's out publicly. So and that's what I wanted to ask you, just to make sure you clarified that, because you just have the one side of everything that went down. So as far as his encounter with this young woman, what do you know about that relationship, or was it a relationship, or there's all these theories about what went on with that. What do you know about that?
Well, again, like I said, my son and I, we talked for 2 hours. Daniel tell me everything. He talks about everything. And he tells me from a son to father perspective on things. And one thing he did when it comes to, I'm sure, young ladies, he's going to speak about it. He talked about it when he was in college. He's talking about this young lady here. He started telling me the story about this young lady in our conversation. One of the things that stuck out to me when he was telling me, when he got to the point, he said he spent the night with a young lady. It was two. He told me about the Instacart thing. I could ask him how he met her. It was the Instacart thing. So he was the strangest way. I met them through them. It was just two ladies through the Instacart situation. Something went wrong with the order when they was ordering some wine. He went to fix that order for them. They thought it was really nice. They invited him into the house. He ended up, spending the night there with one of the young ladies. And the next day he was gone, but he did kind of mention the story about how he had to go get his canopy and things like that. The only concern I had at that point when I stopped him and started asking the details was the fact that he spent the night over a woman's house he didn't know. I told him, hey, son, you can't do that. You're too smart to be, spend the night. How you know this is her house, or things like that. He said, oh, Dad, it's got to be her house because the house is really nice. And I'm like, that's the dumbest thing you could say. You can't just judge off a house like that. But the whole point is, my son decided to do that, spend the night over the lady's house, and spend time with her that way, which I thought wasn't wise. However, he did mention about going back to get his canopy. So when I read in the report and they say, hey, she says, don't come up here uninvited, he did tell me about that prior to this report. He said, hey, he went over there to get he tried to get in contact with her. She didn't answer text messages. So he took it upon. He needed it for his job. The canopy is something he used out there in the desert.
Yeah, for like the shade and the cover. Right. Yeah, because it's hot. Right. Yeah.
So he knew where he left it. He left it in the backyard. I started asking the question, hey, what you doing? How did a canopy get in the backyard? That was kind of strange to me, but he went back there to get it himself. He remembered where she stayed, went to retrieve his canopy. That's where the text message came and say, hey, she saw him through. He explained she saw him through, I think he said like a ring type camera, and she texted him, hey, don't come up here uninvited. So when I read that in the report, I say that's very much out of context. And that's what meant by that. Right.
And so I think that right there, that bit of information is something that we just weren't aware of. And I think that makes a big difference between what the perception is and what the reality is of what went down. And you have information that can kind of, that can corroborate that. So just for clarification, when you say the Instacart thing, explain that really quickly. You say Instacart.
Well, my son, he decided to drive an Instacart. Instacart is, I think, a service, the way I understand it. He didn't tell me about it. I know the reasons why Daniel didn't tell me, because the first time I was like, what you doing with Instacart? But that's the first time I heard that night, why he would be, doing Instacart. So what I learned from his sister is that Daniel decided to do Instacart to make extra money. Instacart is a service where he go pick up people groceries and deliver it to them. He did that because he works for Nature's New World, and Nature's New World do not provide their own vehicles. They don't provide his gas money to everything he do when he go to these well sites. No matter what city he go to here in Arizona, he had to provide all the expenses to the equipment, to whatever case it takes to perform that job. And what he had to do at the end of that job, he had to put in an expense report. And his company would sometimes take time to process that expense report and give him his money back. Before that happened, that can cause his bills to get behind. So that's what caused him to start utilizing Instacart to make sure his bills on time.
Man, I thought geologists made tons of money.
Yes.
I think he'd be out there doing Instacart.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure
Instacart.
people were thinking like, geologist, he's making a ton of money, but
yes,
okay.
Yes.
Just a little perspective for me, and I'm sure for other people who will be watching this. So as far as sightings and tips and things like that, as a parent, I'll say this. I know in doing this podcast, people get hoaxes. They get horrible phone calls from people. They get fake information and all that stuff. And as a parent, I'm assuming you're chasing all this stuff down. So tell me what your experience has been with that, and has any of it panned out to anything?
When Daniel first went missing, of course, the story ended up going national. And when that happened, of course, I have all kind of sightings, whether it's in California. I even had one in Georgia, most of them here in Arizona, Flagstaff, Sedona, other areas here in Arizona, even in the homeless population. So yeah, we tracked all of those down, doing a lot of traveling, but they since kind of subsided. At this point, here it is almost 10 months later. I don't really hear too many more, hey, Mr. Robinson, I see someone that like Daniel. None of them ever panned out. In fact, one only had a picture. Only one of those sightings, somebody produced a picture that definitely wasn't Daniel. But the others, once we go out there, they couldn't provide pictures. We couldn't find any evidence that would say, hey, this was corroborated that it was Daniel. Mm-hmm. But it's very hard every time.
I was going to say, I'm sure you get crazy messages and all types of stuff.
Yeah, I get a crazy message from even from the crazies. One thing is I can't really decipher which thing is credible when people say, hey, I even had messages where someone texts me and say, hey, we have your son, we broke his legs, we got him, up under some house and things like that. So I get crazy, even to the point of threatening me as a father, looking for my son, what I'm saying? So it's all kind of messages I get out there. Even to this day, you get some crazy things out there on the tip line. And some things you got to kind of weave out. And that's the hardest part. It's hard to determine some things you weave out, which is credible to follow after and which ones is not.
Mm-hmm. Has Daniel's employer or former employer, have they had any part in the searches or helped you guys with any of the process of this?
Well, yeah. Well, one thing was disappointing with the company. If like I told the owners, I did have a meeting with them. He's an employee. He was on the job. Before I even got here to Arizona, I expected them to would have been out there with a search party. They had the resources, they had the funding to go out there and do some searches for my son. They didn't do that. One thing, when I started my own searches, though, they did come out to assist. I don't know if it was a mandate from the company or it was a bunch of workers got together and said, hey, we want to come out to the father's searches. But they did come out to the searches to help me man the gate, to direct people in, to perform some of the line searches that I was performing, the hasty searches and things like that. So they did at the beginning. They have since fell off. We do have one, Daniel's boss, his supervisor, who would come out every so often. He don't come to every searcher, but he would come out as many searches as he can.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as Daniel's connection to the company, I know some people were saying like, oh, you guys are family friends of yours or something like that. Can you clarify what the relationship is, or if there is one?
Well, at the beginning, like I said, I reached out to everybody. Buckeye Police Department, his job. I try to get information from everybody, and and with that came a relationship where the company was willing to provide me all the information I need. They even donated to the GoFundMe to kind of help. So they was very helpful on that front, giving me information. But later, as my investigation goes on, had to distance our relationship from family to work. Daniel himself, from what I understand from those meetings I have, had a great relationship with his job, with the coworkers. One of the coworkers there was a very good friend of his. They often go hiking together and things like that. One of the supervisor, tell me Daniel and his wife, Daniel sometimes eat breakfast with him and his wife on the weekends, and they go hiking. So things like that. So they did have a working relationship between my son and his company. So they did have some type of form of relationship themselves.
Mm-hmm. Now let's switch gears a little bit and ask you. I mean, you've been through a lot. Your family has been through a lot. How are you doing mentally? How are you doing emotionally? You know, I know you're a military man, so you just kind of, you know, hold on to those things sometimes. But I'm just wondering, like at this point, I mean, you've done a ton of interviews at this point, but how are you really doing?
Well, I'm doing the best I can. You know, I'm still driven, like I said, driven by my love for my son. First of all, I have God, you know that. And also I do have my military experience, but emotionally, yeah, it's rough. It's rough. Every day is the same thing. Every day, you wake up the next morning, and same thing. My son's still missing. And so it's like starting over and over again. I had to constantly think of new ways to put his name out there, constantly think of ways to techniques and things to search the desert better, or get a flyer distribution out. I have billboards from the east side of Phoenix to out to Buckeye, Arizona on I-10. So I'm just trying to find everything I can, every avenue I can. So it's a lot of strain, of course, a lot of strain. You get pulled different directions trying to do multiple things. I have a foundation coming up, the Daniel Robinson Foundation, and things like that. So it's a lot of pressure, a lot of strains going on, just getting pulled in different directions. It's very hard, very tough.
Yeah, I was going to say about as his mom, his siblings, just
That's right.
extended family. I mean, how are they even coping as well?
You know, and that's the thing. You know, I'm standing together for all of them. You know, they're asking me to bring Daniel home. I'm out here doing that. Talk to the family. They're suffering. You can imagine what the mother's going through. You know, her youngest son is missing. His siblings out there don't know what their little brother at. He have grandparents. He have two grandmothers that's suffering right now, devastated. What's happening with their grandchild, cousins and uncles and aunties. So and friends. So they're doing the best they can under the circumstances. They're hanging in there. They're relying on me, like I said, to give them some of those answers, and I'm looking for them.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about Daniel. Tell me what he's like. What does he like to do? What is his personality like?
Well, Daniel, he's first of all, he's the youngest of his siblings, older siblings, and he's just from birth. You know, so everybody knows Daniel's born without a right hand. From his birth, he was the loudest crying baby I can remember. But he's a very crying. Just let us know that he's very strong. He's a very strong young man. He only asked about his hand one time with his mom. I think it's roughly around 5 years old. Asked his mother where his hand is. His mother told him that God has it and he's going to return it to him one day. He never asked again. One thing was apparent about Daniel, his personality. He's a person that likes to challenge everything. He challenges himself. He challenges his siblings. He challenges them academically from playing video games. You just name it. That's what Daniel does. When he challenges himself, again, you all know that he taught himself how to play the French horn. He played the trumpet. You know, he tried to play a little bit of sports, a little bit of football. He lifted little weights, and then academically, he decided he wanted to be a geologist, and he graduated with honors. So Daniel's that kind of guy. When he want to challenge something, he challenge things. He go out there, he go get it. He's very friendly. Everybody in that school at College of Charleston know him. They call him WAP, but they know him. They see him in the street. He has multiple friends just everywhere. And then, like I said, very much people person. He's driven towards nature. That's why he loved Arizona. He loved hiking, adventurous type stuff. He's a very adventurous guy. He's also, like I said, he's a scientist, very brilliant mind. Have his head very much leveled. Had know exactly which direction to go. He planned it as he go and what he want to do. So that's the way Daniel is, his personality and and he loves his family. One of the lads say he loves his family. He go way out the way. Just even with this COVID, he go out of the way to make trips down to South Carolina to see his grandparents, stay in the yard, so he wouldn't get them sick, and just talk to them through the window so he can come back here to Arizona. So he do love his family, and he like to spend time with them, with us.
Are you temporarily in Arizona? Are you just going to stay longer? Like and where did you move from? Just so I'm clear.
I moved from Columbia, South Carolina is where I live. I do have a home in Columbia, South Carolina. I have a 1-bedroom apartment here to be here until I find my son. I haven't made a permanent decision to either sell a house or things like that, but I do live here also in Phoenix.
So you were in the military, right? So you were just kind of like retired, I guess, at this point. And so your whole life
Yes.
got flipped upside down when this happened.
And that's exactly what happened. You know, one day I'm sitting there enjoying my retirement after all this hard work, enjoying my retirement, sitting on the back area of the house, enjoying myself watching television. When I got that phone call, get that one phone call. Now I'm here in Arizona since that time, looking for my son. So that's exactly how life can just change on a dime.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you a question. So we know about the Jeep and the condition of the Jeep. When you went to Daniel's apartment, I'm curious about what did you find there?
Well, you know, it'd been a hard time for us to get into that apartment. I wasn't able to get into that apartment until the Buckeye Police Department turned over all the belongings to me from Daniel. That contained Daniel's house keys. To be able to get in that apartment, it was very, very hard. But the hardest part was not the fact of getting in his apartment and seeing his things without him being there. The hardest part was when it came down once the investigative, my team, my private investigator finished his job to pack the Daniel things up. When we decided to stop paying the rent and pack everything up and put it in storage, that was the hardest part. We didn't know what to throw away, what to keep. You know, it's hard to know what Daniel wanted and what not. You know, that he didn't want. To see some of his things that he prized, like he had a rock collection. I didn't know what the rock collection was about. He's a geologist. He loved rocks. So to see some of the things and kind of understand some things about him, you know, everybody, once you live on your own, you build your own private life and your private things. So to be able to see those things, him being a grown man and start his own identity, is very hard to decipher, like I said, what to keep, what to not to keep, and things like that. So, and then he's not here to tell us that.
Was there anything weird or strange that you guys discovered in the apartment, or was it just pretty much seemed in the or as an ordinary setup?
Well, one of the biggest things when Buckeye went in there, we was trying to get in there. They didn't go in because they had a warrant. He was able to talk. Detective Biffin was able to talk the landlords and to let him do a walk in the place where the landlord said they was going to watch him. He couldn't touch anything, but he can take a picture. So he did go in. One of the things he showed me in the pictures, they didn't allow me as a family member in at the time. The pictures that I've seen, the only thing that bothered me is that, you know, as a parent, I see his room looking kind of messy. He's a little messy, but you know, as a parent, like, hey, I didn't raise him that way, you know, that type deal. But anything out there didn't stand out until my investigator went in there and he looked at it in a different light. I look at it from a parent's view, thinking like, hey, you know, he need to keep his room a little cleaner. But he looked at it as possible somebody was in there looking for something. And one of the things were because of the vacuum cleaner, Daniel had a vacuum cleaner plugged up as he was in the middle of vacuuming, but then he had all these things thrown on top of the vacuum cleaner itself that would indicate somebody was looking for something. So he had some little clues like that. So that was still questionable to this day. We're trying to look into those also.
I mean, that sounds strange, for sure.
Yes.
So as far as what's next for you, I read that you were going to a Buckeye City Council meeting. What is that about, and where are you going?
Well, you know, I've been here since June the 26th. I keep repeating that for a reason. I've been on the ground. Been on the ground searching hard for my son. I've been working with the department. And then I was working outside of the department. I hired a private investigator. I have hundreds of volunteers on the ground out there in that desert, finding human remains. I brought in a lot of interviews from the big networks coming in to do interviews with the police department out on the ground, all the social media attention, all this kind of stuff going on. And not one time did the city managers, the manager, or the mayor, I meant to say the mayor, the city managers, or anybody alike would say, hey, Mr. Robinson, you're here in Arizona. I'm sorry what happened to your son. We're gonna do anything we can to try to help. Or just say, hey, Mr. Robinson, we hope you just go back home to South Carolina. They didn't acknowledge me at all. And so one of the biggest things is I went to the first city council meeting, the first one of this month, just to make a statement. I sat there in the front row just to make a statement saying I'm here. And this one that's coming up, I'm actually going to speak because I want to say I'm here. One way or the other, I know that this department, I've been here since June 26th. Like I said, you're a mayor of a city. You're supposed to know what happened in your city. And I'm sure they know that I have hundreds of volunteers out there searching for my son. And they have not one time even sent me a letter or acknowledgement that I'm here on that ground.
And actually, and listening to you, and I know you kind of mentioned it before, but As far as the media coverage, how do you feel about how it came about for you? Because I know you were getting some traction a little bit in the beginning, but then, when Gabby Petito's case became more prominent, I guess it kind of led to your coverage. So what do you think? What do you make of that?
And it's sad to say that, I have been working hard. I mean, I lost many nights of sleep. And sometimes I didn't like to give myself credit, but just hindsight now, I have team members say, hey, yes, Mr. Robinson, give yourself some credit. I've been working really hard, day and night, texting, emailing, contacting people, traveling, just to get a little exposure. It started with the local news. It started with two reporters here, local reporters, who was able to get my son's story out there. I started going to little radio stations here, getting this thing out there. And then it took a tweet. I started doing things on social media really hard, reaching out to people. And it took a tweet from a young lady who retweeted a tweet of mine, and it went viral. That kind of gave some little traction. Started hitting some of these celebrities, couldn't get them, started hitting their friends up. And for instance, like one of the people on MSNBC, for instance, Joy Reid, was able to hear Jane's story through one of the friends of hers, who alerted her to that from the hard work of reaching out to these people. Then it took the Tito case to highlight it, to bring it into another level. So it's very sad that you have to go through 3 months of hard work as a father sitting out here trying to get some attention for his son's case. 3 months, and then it all contributed to a tragedy that happened to another person's family. You know what I'm saying? And that's very hard to even hear from me at that point. When it was first brought to my attention, it was devastating to me to hear another family was going through the same thing that I was going through. But then afterwards, it's devastating to know that people try to pin those two things together, and it's very hard to even take that. I know how that family feels. I know how I feel. But I couldn't ignore the fact that there's disparities that happen with people of color more so than anything.
Mm-hmm. And I think I want to just kind of lead to another question too. With that, I think the illusion of, or the perception that Black fathers aren't around, Black fathers aren't there for their kids, but you are clearly that. You are clearly there for your son and everyone else. You know. Can you speak on that? Because I think people need to get that perspective from you about what it's been like for you as a Black father, and like the perception of Black fathers in America.
For me, it would go back to my childhood, of course. I didn't grow up with a father. I grew up in a single parent home. My mother raised me and my sister. So my vision of a father, when I became a father, I didn't know how to be a father, of course, so I didn't have any role model to teach me that. But one thing I did have was my love for my children and all the things that I would like for a father to be for me, when I was growing up. So it gave me a drive. It gave me a drive to when I first had my first son. I felt proud. I held him up like they did in the movie Roots. It may sound kind of crazy. Held him up and I gave him a promise. I will always be there in your life. Always. That was a promise for him and anybody who came after him. And that's one of the things. I would like to say that, as a Black father, I love my children just like any other father would love their children. Any other mother would love their children. And I can't see it no different. Whether you're a male or female, your children are your children. And, as a Black father, yes. And I do get that there's a lot of stereotypes out there when it comes to Black males not loving our children. I can't see it, I guess, because I do love mine.
I know you've learned a lot of lessons through this process. What would you say to other families, especially families of color who struggle to get coverage for their kids? Is there any main lesson that you've learned that you want to pass on to them?
Well, one thing is I know you just can't give up. One thing is just don't take somebody's word for anything. I don't care if they're wearing a badge and a blue suit, with a gun, meaning law enforcement. Just don't take people's word for, hey, we're looking for your loved one. We really trying hard, or any kind of narrative that you don't know about your own child. You fight for your child. You fight for your loved one. Sometimes we don't get the coverage that we deserve for our loved one. You create your own. I had to create my own YouTube channel to put my narrative, my son's story out there the way I need it, to get it out far as I can. Make that channel grow. Do whatever you got to do. Start your own searches. Everything you may have to end up doing for yourself, but at the end, it'll become worth it. So I say, whatever you do, do not give up on your loved one. And like I said, just don't take anybody's words for anything.
What would you say to the people who've helped you through all of this, all the searches? I mean, that's out in the desert. You're talking about the summer. What would you say to everyone who's contributed to your GoFundMe page, to those who have helped you search for your son, your words for them?
I love them. I love every last one of them. They tell you that all the time. I tell them all the time, and that's from the bottom of my heart. And when I say I love them, I really love them. Because anytime somebody can take empathy for another person's family, they don't know Daniel. They don't know me. But they put themselves in my shoes. They say, hey, look, man, this man looking for his son. It could easily happen to me. I can only imagine what that father's going through. I can imagine what that mother's going through. I can imagine what his siblings are going through. And when time people put themselves in that kind of place, we are a family. We are a big unit, and it takes a family to do what I'm doing. I cannot do this by myself. I cannot search a desert by myself. I cannot get these flyers out here. I can't create banners. All the stuff that's happening right now, I can't do all this by myself. It takes a team effort. It takes a people effort. And whenever people come together like this, that's what happens. Things do happen. I love each and every one of them. And I tell them I value them. I don't take it for granted. And I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for everything God allowed these people to do. And I'm very happy right now.
And if Daniel could hear you right now, what would you say to him?
He knows, Daniel, he knows I love him. I love him. He knows how I am as a father. He's a go-getter. I'm a go-getter. And he knows that I love him. And I'm going to do everything I can. I mean, no matter what, he knows I'm not giving up on him. I'm not giving up on you. I'm not giving up on him. That's kind of hard to say it at the way like I'm talking to him right now. But yes, I definitely am not giving up on my son. And he's worth it. He's worth it. I love him. He's mine. He's a Robinson. And, I'm not going to I'm doing everything I can to make sure I bring him back home.
When it comes to my final thoughts about this case, the first thing that comes to mind is, did Daniel encounter an unexpected situation and people in the desert, and that somehow led to his disappearance? And what about the well that David believes was intentionally filled with dirt and has something buried in it? As for the theory of Daniel leaving his family to become a monk, that doesn't seem likely considering his close relationship with his family. It would seem to me that with all the miles of searching so far, that Daniel would have been found at some point. David also said that his son was in a normal state of mind the last time that he spoke to him. And when it comes to the story about Daniel stalking or being obsessed with a young woman he met during his part-time delivery job just before his disappearance, David is adamant and says he has proof that through his son's information, that was not the case. I'm also wondering about the condition of Daniel's apartment. It was neat in the front area, but when the family's investigator at the time looked at his bedroom, it appeared to be tossed, as if someone was in there searching for something, and if that was the case, what were they looking for? There are a ton of questions about this case that still need to be answered, but the bottom line is the family is still desperate to find their loved one, and they want to bring a close to the situation. If you have any information in this case, call Buckeye Police at 623-349-6411 or the Robinson Family Hotline at 844-602-0660. I'll continue to follow this case closely and let you know what happens next. If you have a case that you want me to check out, you can reach me on the Intrigued Full Effect Facebook page or via email at intriguedfulleffect@hotmail.com. Until next time, be safe and stay true. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Intrigued Full Effect, Curious Cases, Disappearances, and Other Stuff podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the host. The primary purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. The host of this podcast assumes no liability or responsibility for any activities in connection with opinions shared in the podcast. The podcast and blog associated with it shall not be used in any legal capacity or as a basis for expert testimony. Any copyright material in the podcast is approved by the owner or is part of the public domain. Music by Pond 5.